This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a markets update for you. Starting in the JSE, the indices over there pretty much on a league of their own, with a 14% year-to-date rise on the top 40 and the all share. Bourses in Nigeria and Egypt roughly 4% lower so far this year. The NSE Nairobi marginal gain, roughly 0.6%, and the all share in Casablanca is up around 3.33% higher. 1% minimum tax, which would have hit firms with an annual turnover of just under $470,000, has also been temporarily suspended in Kenya until a legal challenge to it is resolved. The first installment of payments due under that tax, which came into effect on the 1st of January, are actually due tomorrow on the 20th of April. We'll keep you updated on that story. In the meantime, here are your headlines. The Egyptian president is ordering a probe into recurrent train accidents. We'll be exploring what ails railway services in Egypt. The UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs is raising the alarm about a looming debt crisis on the continent. And India's capital of Delhi starts a full lockdown to contain the rapid spread of COVID-19. Our starting point tonight is Egypt. Following the latest in a string of rail accidents to hit the North African state in recent years, the country's president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, has now ordered an investigation into the derailment of a passenger train on Sunday north of Cairo, in which 11 people were killed and dozens were injured. Rail authorities say at least 4 carriages went off the tracks at the city of Bana in Kalibia province. Now, the train was travelling to the Nile Delta city of Mansoura from the Egyptian capital. Sunday's train accident came 3 weeks after 2 passenger trains collided in the province of Sohag, killing at least 18 people and injuring 200 others. Prosecutors found that gross negligence by rail employees was behind that deadly crash, which took place on the 25th of March. All right then, so what exactly is going on with the rail system in Egypt? Let's find out. Adel Mahrouki joins us now live from Cairo with more data on this story. Adel, bring us up to speed with the latest developments on this latest derailment. What's happened ever since it happened, ever since these 4 carriages went off the track on Sunday? Adele, if you can hear me.
The rescue efforts have concluded just hours after the accident happened yesterday night. And most of those injured have been released. 98 people have been injured, according to the Egyptian health minister. Most of those injured have been relocated and have been cleared from the hospitals. On the other hand, investigations are still ongoing, but the Egyptian government this time is quite keen about the release of information. If you recall, Ramah, about 3 weeks ago when the deadly happened of Sohag that you've just mentioned happened, the Transportation Ministry released a statement about the details of how the events unfolded. However, the Prosecutor General has forbidden any release from the government until his investigations conclude. And this is what we're waiting for, actually. On the ground, the derailment wreckage have been cleared and railroad traffic has resumed normally. Ramah?
All right, so this is the most recent incident, though, involving train accidents. There was the April 15 derailment. There was a March 26 collision of 2 trains that we mentioned a little earlier. I mean, clearly there is a systemic safety issue across the public rail system in Egypt. What's being done to solve it?
Let me give you a quick figure. From 2006 until 2018, the average number of accidents that took place every year is about 1,181 accidents related to railroad in Egypt. So of course, this is a staggering number. The least year reported over 400 incidents, and in 2018 it was more than 2,000. What it indicates is that there is an immediate and urge to restructure the entire system as it is aging. It's one of the oldest in the world and probably the oldest in Africa. And therefore, to renovate this entire system is a huge burden on the budget. According to the Egyptian president and the transportation minister, they expect that to revamp the railroad network, they need about 220 billion Egyptian pounds. That's around $14 billion, Ramah. And of course, you know how the government is proceeding with its budget deficit. So it's a huge burden, especially it is standing against what Egypt wants to invest in developing the economy and creating more job opportunities and increasing investments in the country. So it is still a priority, and the country is moving forward with that. It's trying to relocate its needs from imports to local production, and this is what the government is actually trying to move forward for, to advance the systems of the railroad without resorting as much as possible to importing from other countries.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Adel Mahrouki there in Cairo. To apologize, of course, for the lengthy ping rates on that particular connection. Now, on to East Africa. Tanzania has announced measures that aim at improving the investment climate in the country, and that includes overhauling laws and policies. The move is in response to President Samia Suluhu Hassan's directive to government officials to remove all hurdles that investors face in the East African nation. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lucando with the details from Dar es Salaam.
Tanzania wants to take the term business-friendly to a whole new level. The government is preparing a national investment development strategy and a new investment law. The country's prime minister says the new measures will attract investors and make it easier to do business in the country.
This step will enable many investors to come to the country, and it will also enable Tanzanians with capital to invest it, bring technology and know-how in order to rapidly grow the economy, generate employment and bring development in general.
To achieve its goal, the government is removing hurdles for investors, which includes complaints over tax payment, red tape in issuing work permits, and corruption. The government says it also plans to review and improve the 1996 investment policy as well as the 1997 Investment Act.
In the next financial year 2021-2022, the government will improve the execution of the national investment strategy, including setting aside land for investment and developing crucial investment systems in all regions in order to attract investments.
The government says it has set up an electronic system to handle investor complaints, but investors can also air their grievances through the Tanzania National Business Council. While Tanzania has done relatively well in the World Bank Doing Business report over the last 3 years, the United Nations 2020 World Investment Report shows that there could be room for improvement, especially in the area of foreign direct investment. As a means of attracting more foreign investors, an update of the country's tax laws to keep up with changing times is also being proposed.
The last time I remember Tanzania has changed its Income Tax Act was way back 2009, I think. That was the last time during Kikwete's era. So now we are into 2021, so it has been a very long time. And I think these past 10 years, our economy has completely changed. So many things have been digitized. Our economy is going digital very fast. So I think even the thinking of how do we do taxes should be given a well thought.
Having reached lower middle income status, Tanzania faces an uphill task of adding around $3,000 to the national average income to get to upper middle income status. The government hopes attracting new investors will provide a path to the country's next level economically. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
On to West Africa now, where rehabilitation work will soon start on Nigeria's biggest refinery in Port Harcourt. Authorities in Africa's largest crude oil producer have signed a $1.5 billion agreement with an Italian engineering firm, Tecnimont SPA, to start the work. The government aims to return the refinery to at least 90% of its effective production capacity within 18 months. As CGTN's Deji Badmus explores now from Lagos.
For several years, Nigeria's 210,000 barrels per day Port Harcourt refinery has been more or less dormant, like the country's 3 other refineries. With no domestic refining, the country has had to rely on import of refined petrol for its domestic consumption, and that's costing it nearly $300 million every month on subsidy. It's the main reason the government has now chosen to spend $1.5 billion to fix its largest refinery, hoping that will effectively put an end to the controversial subsidy as well.
One of the reasons why our refineries cannot function is subsidy. Because you cannot be refining at a cost and selling at a subsidized rate. Now that constraint will be taken away by deregulation. That is the more reason why we must fix our refinery, so that our refineries can now function optimally.
The rehabilitation of the refinery will effectively restart domestic refining of petrol. It will also cut down on petrol imports, saving the country much-needed foreign exchange as well.
It is an excellent plan. It is an excellent initiative. The concept is straightforward. Get the crude oil from the wellheads or Christmas tree within Nigeria in Naira. Move them to the respective Nigerian refineries, whether using trucks, wagons, or trains, or pipelines in Naira. Refine them in Naira. Distribute them in Naira. Gain your Naira and free yourself from exchange rate differentials and pressures.
There have been calls for the outright sale of the refinery instead of fixing it, but the government has chosen to get it operational for now.
A functioning refinery will definitely fetch more for the government than a non-functional refinery. That is why we feel that we have to rehabilitate this refinery, and then government will decide what to do with it, whether to privatize it or whether to commercialize it, whether they want to concession it. That is for government to decide, but that will be the next, at the next level. But at this point, we want to give Nigerians a functional refinery.
Work on the refinery has been scheduled in 3 phases. The first will last for 18 months, while the second phase of repairs will last for 24 months. The job will then be rounded off in another 48 months. The government says once the refinery is up and running, it will turn its attention to its other 3 refineries, which are all non-functional at the moment. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
All right, and a quick run through some company news. Starting in the world of venture capital, Samurai Incubate, it's a Tokyo-based venture capital firm, has launched an $18.6 million fund targeting African startups. Specifically, the Samurai Africa's second general partnership fund will operate and focus on 3 countries, Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. But that's not exclusive. It will also be investing in startups from other African states. Since August 2018, Samurai Incubate has invested roughly $2.5 million across 20 startups across the African continent. Emerald and ruby minor gem fields generated $31.4 million in revenue from a series of sequential mini auctions between the 15th and the 17th of April. The rough emeralds were sold at the auction. They were all extracted before March 2020 from the mining license held and operated by Kagem Mining. Now, operations at Kagem were suspended back in March, and they do remain suspended until March this year due to COVID-19. Mining operations are expected to ramp back up to full scale by the end of April. In the world of financial services, the listed insurance firm Jubilee Holdings expects to complete the sale of a majority stake in regional general insurance subsidiaries to Allianz SE by the end of June. The transactions were initially scheduled to be wrapped up in the first quarter that ended in March. The company will receive some $72 million from that transaction. $27 million of that will be invested in the operating businesses of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Mauritius. And finally, Toyota, one of the world's largest car makers, has signaled an interesting shift in its climate change stance. It says it will review its lobbying and it will be more transparent on what steps it's taking as it faces increased activist and investor pressure. Toyota came under scrutiny after siding with the Trump administration back in 2019 in a bid to bar the state of California from setting its own fuel efficiency rules. The automaker since then has dropped that support. That's a run through your company headlines. We're 15 minutes into the hour. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. We'll explore why the United Nations is raising alarm of a looming debt crisis in Africa. And authorities in South Africa are set to lift the ban on using the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference. Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. The United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs has joined other bodies around the world to raise the alarm about a looming debt crisis on the continent, which has been compounded by the economic and social damage being inflicted across the continent by the COVID-19 pandemic. South Africa, for one, has been struggling to grow its economy for years. Debt to GDP ratios over there are well over 80% and still climbing. Here's Sumitra Naidu with that story.
The South African economy is expected to grow around 3% this year. This growth would be coming off a low base. Growth in South Africa has been declining for years, while debt has been escalating.
Is important is that South Africa should in fact have a strategy for growth. We should continue to borrow, but ensure that we have a strategy for growth. At 87%, at 90%, it's healthy for South Africa to have that debt ratio for as long as our economy continues to grow.
The IMF's Financing for Sustainable Development Report 2021 found that a third of emerging market economies are assessed to be at high risk of fiscal crisis.
We know that in more than half of developing countries, debt service takes more than 25% of their tax revenue. And this is the figure from last year. And in many of those, the figure is more than 40% of tax revenue that is going into debt service payments.
The IMF's decision to unlock member countries' special drawing rights could be an opportunity for South Africa to solve its debt burden.
You can use that money for whatever purpose you want, but also you can swap. For example, we went to the IMF to borrow this about $4.something billion, and we have almost the same amount in SDR. We can therefore swap that money, pay them using the SDR that we have there, and have no debt.
Major infrastructure projects are in the pipeline to boost economic activity and create jobs for the unemployed as the country embarks on its post-COVID-19 recovery.
South Africa's way of investing in infrastructure is through PPPs, borrowing money from the private sector or internationally But again, those are the places where money is borrowed at very expensive rates. It's unlikely to derail our growth capacity. But what that does is that all the money that you borrow from outside, you have to pay. So there's a leakage out of the economy. So instead of boosting the economy, you're actually flatlining it.
South Africa's woes have been worsened by COVID. The country already has one of the highest rates of poverty and inequality in the world. Research by PwC suggests it could take up to 5 years before the economy gets back to pre-lockdown levels. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, there is still significant demand for high-yielding debt across the world, and that high demand, particularly for African Eurobonds, is spurring a wave of issuance across the continent. Benin, for example, saw its ratings outlook improve after successful Eurobond issuances back in January. In February, Cote d'Ivoire went to the markets, raised over $1 billion in a Eurobond sale that saw investors place orders for triple the amount on offer. And now Kenya is also planning to use the debt instrument to raise another $1 billion by June. Ghana and Nigeria also planning to prepare their own issues. According to Quartz, an online economic affairs website, after a pandemic-induced lull in borrowing, governments and investors are feeling a bit more confident about the prospects of economies on the continent, in part thanks to billions of dollars worth of COVID-19 recovery help from the IMF and other multilateral lenders. African countries typically use Eurobond funds to finance maturing debt obligations and relatively costly infrastructure projects. So let's explore the debt crisis that some countries on the continent are already dealing with at the moment. Professor Ekson Iraqi is a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi, focusing on, among other things, managerial economics. He joins us now live on the program. Thank you for your time this evening, sir. So let's start with a bit of comparative history, because the last time we had a major debt relief program, the highly indebted poverty reduction program, that was back in 1996. I wasn't even 10 back then. For a lot of audiences who are watching this, this might be history. So how does that program compare to the debt relief measures required today, like the G20 debt framework?
I think 25 years ago is quite some time ago, as you have observed. Because if you look at 1996, when this debt relief business started, a lot of African governments were not democratic. There were no regular polls. And it means that whatever the government did, the citizens did not know what was happening. The citizens were not exposed to a lot of transparency. They could not ask government questions. But fast forward to 2021 or 2020, a lot of governments now are democratic. Whatever they do, the citizens ask questions. Add internet and social media, and transparency becomes a very big issue in debt issues. Remember last week or last month or last week when the government of Kenya said that they are going to get some money from IMF, Kenyans were up in arms, even telling IMF not to give Kenya any debt. So things have changed. Media, more transparency, but today there is something you mentioned that is very important, COVID-19. COVID-19 has changed the debt, the mathematics of debt. But the two situations 25 years ago and today are very different.
But isn't part of the problem the fact that, at least at this point in time, you've got so many more different lenders on the table as well? Because in 1996, it was either you've borrowed bilaterally from the UK or the US or Germany or whoever, and the World Bank and the IMF. You could basically put all those guys in the same room. Now you have to add China, Saudi Arabia, Japan, commercial lenders who've essentially lent us money on Eurobonds. So how then can we effectively give all of these individuals a sensible deal?
Some African leaders and some African politicians and policy makers are saying this is Africa's golden age when it comes to debt. You can play the raiders against one another. If the Westerners are not giving you money, you can go to Chinese. You can go to the lender who gives you the best deal. So as far as debt is concerned, we think it is a very good time. But the question is whether we are going to get the money we are going to get from the West or from China into the good use. Remember, that has always been the perennial question. You borrow money from the West, you borrow money from China, wherever you borrow it, do you put it into good use? I think that is a bigger question than where you get it from.
Let me loop back to something that you mentioned a little earlier, the problem of transparency. Because in Kenya's case, as you mentioned, Kenyans were pretty pissed off at the fact that the government was going back to look for bailout from the IMF, $2.34 billion, agreed to over a 36-month program. But for typical Kenyan citizens, do they have legal options to force their government to be 100% transparent with all the debt they have on their books?
They have about 3 options. I don't think they have exploited them very well. One of them is, if you look at the 2010 Constitution, public participation is very well enshrined. That for any major decision to be implemented by the government, the citizens must always participate. And I've seen very major decisions in Kenya that were reversed in court because there was no evidence of public participation. The question is whether an ordinary Kenyan citizen knows how powerful he is in such issues. Number 2, the Kenyans can go to court and challenge any government decision, including borrowing money. In fact, today there was a court case where a certain type of tax was overturned by the court, at least temporarily. And very important, Kenya's other powerful weapon is to vote out leaders that they don't consider to be transparent or to be contributing to the economic growth of the country. Those are the 3 options that Kenyans have.
You've also written about the dilemma facing authorities in countries like Kenya, because public spending is clearly not sustainable. We can't run deficits of 7, 8, 9% year after year after year. But the economic reforms that are needed to actually fix this problem are also by themselves rather painful. Tax hikes, spending cuts, or a mix of those two. They're not palatable either. But for the benefit of our viewers around the world, can you explain why in our particular context that cutting public spending is such a difficult thing?
In fact, one of the reasons why Kenyans were not very happy with the IMF is they could remember what happened some times ago when IMF gave us some loans. And they gave conditions that the government must retrench its employees. Some people had to lose jobs. So in this case, the reason why it is very hard to cut public spending is a very simple reason. Most of the money that the government collects as taxes goes to paying wages and salaries. So if you reduce public spending, you are saying that some people must lose their jobs. But remember that if people lose jobs, then the politicians or the political leaders lose votes. So there are a lot of vested interest in cutting public spending. You reduce it, people will be angry, people will be saying we are losing jobs, and you lose votes. Remember that in Kenya and other African countries, we don't have a very big private sector that can absorb a lot of employees. We don't have Googles, we don't have Apples, we don't have Walmarts. So the public sector becomes a very important employer. And anybody talking about reducing jobs in that sector is going to face a very serious political backlash.
But it is sort of inevitable at this point, though, that we will have to cut spending at some point, because if we can't keep spending $25 billion, yet our tax base is about $14 billion year after year after year.
And that's why people are seeing the IMF conditions as a tablet or as medicine. Medicine is very bitter, but you have to swallow it, or you have to swallow it if you have to get better. But I'm sure it's going to be a very big political debate when we try to implement IMF recommendations as far as that is concerned. But I think inevitably, we must face our moment of truth.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Professor Eksen Uraki from the University of Nairobi. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Much appreciated. All right, then on to the world of medicine and public policy. South Africa's suspension of the use of the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Johnson & Johnson may soon be lifted. The rollout of the jab as part of the local study on health workers was temporarily paused after rare clotting events were found in 6 patients in the United States. Now, to be clear, South Africa has so far not recorded any such cases, and its health regulatory authority has recommended that vaccinations using the Johnson & Johnson vaccine continue. CGTN's Julie Shire has this report.
South Africa is eager to get its Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine study back on track after it was temporarily halted over fears of clotting. The health regulatory has recommended that the Sisonke trial be allowed to continue with strict conditions.
The vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia and thrombosis is an idiosyncratic reaction. It's an immune-based reaction that is we cannot predict who gets it. Up until now, the cases worldwide have been in the age range of 18 to 48. And so, in fact, we are going to go ahead. We haven't seen a case of the so-called VITT or VIT in South Africa.
The benefits outweigh from Johnson & Johnson the current risks. And there was only one person that died in USA with this platelet problem. Remember, it's not the same than one would normally expect if you get clots. So this is a different mechanism that's been used. It's a very extremely rare condition.
Most recipients who have received the jab are women with an average age of 40. Just under 150 people have reported severe side effects, but none for clotting. Doctors are being asked to be vigilant as the possibility cannot be ruled out.
The VITT presentation is with severe, unrelenting headache or severe chest pain, unrelenting, and severe abdominal pain that is continuous and unrelenting. Those are because these are clots occurring in major venous systems in the head or in the abdomen, and this is not a mild presentation. People will want to go to hospital, and the clinicians need to be aware.
Recipients will also be updated accordingly before taking the jab.
And the informed consent forms will go through specifically all of the new information, so people are required to read that. This is a study, so that is important for them to do before they sign off. Most of the information will then be done again at the vaccination site, just to make sure that people do understand all of the information so that they're making an informed decision before they get their vaccine.
A decision on how soon vaccinations will resume is expected in the next coming days. 200,000 vaccines still have to be administered before a second phase mass rollout begins in mid-May. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
It's 18:31 GMT, time for another break. Here's what's coming up. India's capital starts a full lockdown tonight to contain the rapid spread of COVID-19. And high-end luxury brands are making their debut at this year's Shanghai Auto Show.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
All right, then welcome back to the program. These are some of the stories we're keeping an eye on at the shower. Starting in Chad, the government over there is trying to reassure citizens and the international community that an insurgency in the north of the country is under control. Now, the military over there claims to have killed roughly 300 rebels. The government says they're part of an armed group approaching the capital of N'Djamena. The group is the Front for Change and Concord in Chad. It's believed to have had some of its members trained in Libya. According to some reports, the group crossed over into Chad on the 11th of April. South Africa's suspension of the use of the COVID-19 Johnson & Johnson vaccine may soon be lifted. The rollout of the jab in a local study on health workers was paused temporarily after rare clotting events were found in 6 patients in the US. South Africa, however, has not recorded any such cases. Cape Verde's ruling party set to maintain its majority in parliament. This follows Sunday's parliamentary elections. The ruling party has so far secured 36 of 72 seats. 3 seats, however, were yet to be determined. The main opposition leader, Yanira Hoffa-Almada, had hoped to become the country's first female prime minister, but her party's loss ruled that out. The opposition had led a campaign criticizing the ruling party's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, back to South Africa, a mountain fire continues to cause widespread destruction in Cape Town. The blaze that started on Sunday on the slopes of Table Mountain has destroyed property, including a historical monument. The University of Cape Town has also been badly affected after one of its libraries was gutted by the inferno. That's a run through your headlines. Away from the continent now, India's capital of Delhi goes into lockdown from Monday night following a sharp rise in coronavirus infections in the city and pretty much across the country. Daily cases have been in the triple digits for nearly 2 weeks now. Delhi joins cities in around 13 other states that have imposed restrictions of some sort, including India's financial centre, Mumbai. Our reporter Gaojan has more.
I'm currently north of India's financial capital, Mumbai. Although many people here always say that Mumbai never stops, the city has been in slow motion for the past few days since restrictions were imposed on April the 14th, or what they call the Janata curfew. As far as I can tell, the streets and markets here are clearly less crowded. People are only allowed to go out for essential activities, and only essential businesses are allowed to operate during the Janata curfew, which may last till 1st of May. However, some parts of the city have become busier, such as train stations. Railway authorities say as many as 350,000 migrant workers has returned to their hometown from Mumbai in the last 2 weeks, fearing the risk of losing jobs. Hospitals are under pressure with reports of shortage of hospital beds and oxygen. Some patients even have to share beds and oxygen when available. Despite being the largest vaccine producer in the world, India is also facing vaccine shortages. Several vaccination centers in Mumbai say they have had to turn people away because of the lack of supplies. This may affect the Indians' vaccination campaign and its effort to control the pandemic, as Mumbai remains to be the country's one of the worst hit cities. Gao Zhen, CGTN, Mumbai.
Now, this is day 2 of the Boao Forum for Asia. It's taking place in southern China's Hainan province. China's head of state, Xi Jinping, will deliver a keynote address on Tuesday through a video link. Now, the theme of the 4-day annual event is a world in change, joining hands to strengthen global governance and advance Belt and Road Initiative cooperation. Today's event started with a dialogue on the topic of globalization in the post-pandemic era. The agenda mainly focuses on the near future of medical ecology, plus also, of course, the economic recovery around the world. Boao Forum is the world's first major international event on the conference circuit to be held offline this year. Over 4,000 participants are in the coastal town. The world's largest free trade deal, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, was signed last year. Members of that particular pact include 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, plus Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand and South Korea. Basically, the entire Pacific Rim, bar the United States and Canada. Now, it covers roughly 30% of global GDP and population. A special session at the Boao Forum for Asia tackled the impact of this deal. Here's Yang Chengxi with more.
Our topic for this year's Boao Forum for Asia, the world's biggest trade deal. Experts say the RCEP could greatly reduce tariffs among its members by as much as 90% over the next 20 years.
Previous trade tensions and COVID-19 pandemic have destabilized global industry chains and supply chains. Many countries have started to wonder where globalization would go next. In this difficult time, 15 countries in Asia signed the RCEP. It is a very important event.
It's not only traditional trade that's benefited. A chapter of the agreement outlined e-commerce specifically, including regulations, the facilitation of paperless trade, e-authentication, and e-signatures. More digital business means great opportunities for companies like Chin Data Group, which has an overseas headquarters in Singapore.
Our most important market is Malaysia. We believe the Asia-Pacific region presents great opportunities for us. Our data center in Malaysia helps our Chinese clients do e-commerce. Our project in preparation in Thailand is also for e-commerce. The RCEP gives Chinese businesses the chance to go overseas. On the other hand, it gives our overseas clients an opportunity to explore data sharing under the new policy framework.
The agreement is still being ratified. China, Thailand, and Singapore have already done so. It's expected to come into effect next year, creating new opportunities for businesses. Current trade between China and other RCEP members already accounts for about 1/3 of China's total foreign trade volume. Experts say the agreement is expected to help member economies recover from the blow of COVID-19 and furthermore, take a symbolic stand against global protectionism. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Boao, Hainan Province.
Cryptocurrencies, digital currencies if you prefer. They're one of the many cutting-edge fintech projects that have drawn interest from participants at the Boao Forum this year. We'll speak about Bitcoin right at the end of the program. But China's digital yuan has made some interesting progress in recent years. Forumgoers were optimistic about its future development.
Since 2019, the People's Bank of China has trialed the digital yuan in multiple cities. And at the Boao Forum, the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank Li Bo said the government was considering expanding this to other areas, like the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. The move will mark the first time China opens its digital currency for foreign users.
Another thing we need to do is to strengthen our e-CNY ecosystem, including technology infrastructure. In addition, we need to continue to improve the safety and reliability of our system. And finally, we need to build a proper legal and regulatory environment for e-CNY.
Participants at the forum said China is ahead of most countries in terms of its digital currency trial. Some believe China's trials will boost the yuan's internationalization as the popularity of digital currencies grow.
China's advances in the digital currency have been really remarkable. But I think what's interesting and exciting is the internationalization of that, should that come about. And of course, when and if it comes about is a policy decision.
At the forum, the former central bank governor Zhou Xiaochuan also said the demand for digital yuan came mostly from China's domestic market and predicted the digital yuan will make cross-border payments easier.
Now, this pandemic obviously has sent most of the world's luxury spending into a tailspin. China is the only major economy expected to show significant growth this year. First quarter growth was over 18%. On What's Hot Tonight, CGTN's Chen Tong takes you to the 2021 Shanghai Auto Show, where high-end brands are making their debut, and they're hoping for a big slice of that spending pie.
Chinese consumers may not be familiar with this car brand, because high-end car maker Genesis is only just now making its debut in the China market. At this year's Shanghai Auto Show, the South Korean brand is bringing its NEV model. No pricing has yet been set, but Genesis is benchmarking BMW and Mercedes-Benz.
China is the biggest luxury car market and a very fierce one, but at the same time, the Chinese consumers are very open to try new brands and to be embraced by new brands. So we feel that we really need to build our own relation with the Generation Genesis audience. Of course, we put the EV world premiere into China because there is a high luxury and a high EV share in the market.
And there are even more expensive brands targeting China's high-end consumers. This new model is from Aston Martin. The price nearly 2 million yuan, or $300,000. And the delivery is slated for the fourth quarter this year. Last year, Aston Martin sales in China hit a record high despite the epidemic. No wonder luxury car makers see so much promise.
Lucky enough, I think, thanks to the very good measures, to the really very effective measures, I think the luxury car market and the car market in the last half year or the 9 months has been developing very, very positive in China, different from global.
Luxury car sales in China are surging. Last year, sales of China's high-end cars jumped by 15% from the previous year. This has attracted new brands and new models to come. Research from IHS Markit shows total passenger car sales worldwide dropped by 15% in 2020 amid the pandemic. But that China led performance, with the 32% market share. That robust growth is why some 1,000 enterprises from all over the world are in Shanghai to showcase their latest designs. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
Still on the Auto China event this year, the first day is usually just for the media before the doors are open to the public. CGTN's Shi Cheng was there to walk us through some of the highlights, including the market craze of electric vehicles.
Welcome to Auto China 2021. This year it's in Shanghai. Well, the world hasn't fully gone out of the woods yet in terms of the pandemic. However, China auto sales saw a big rebound in the first quarter. But if you compare with the first quarter of 2019, the pre-pandemic levels, the growth was pretty minimal. So what could be the new driver for China's auto sales? Well, electrification and e-car. That segment is a pretty hot topic at this year's auto show here in Shanghai. So a lot of Chinese brands and Chinese big techs are showcasing their latest technologies in battery and smart driving. So I will discover some of the new technologies with the social media influencer and auto expert Francis Mushan. What do they have to offer? Like why their batteries are different?
You see that crowd was very focused on this area because Huawei has published the Huawei HI charger, and also they have made the battery charging time half cut.
Okay.
So every people
reduce the charging time by half.
Yes, reduce the charging time by half, and also they use AI technology to the voltage. They improve the voltage.
Okay, so to make sure that batteries are fully used all the time. Yeah, Francis, you said earlier that Huawei is not going to make cars in the next 5 years. However, they do have a partnership with Beiti.
Yes, and it is our first new productions, and they are focusing on the ADAS, high-level autopilot, auto drive, and you see there's 5G inside, and they can make communication with the cars, and the cars know every position between them and making more safer.
Right now we are right next to the BYD booth, so I actually don't want to talk about their cars. I want to talk their batteries.
Yes, the battery improvement is very large for these 2 years. For example, BYD have published the blade batteries. This have new materials for this is like a revolution of the battery, and it's more safer and never burn.
To the old world of automakers, for example, Ford, the American automaker, is also on the move in terms of electrification. One of its latest e-offerings is the electric version of Mustang, and the company has already started receiving pre-orders of this car.
We have a very ambitious plan in electrification. We announced early this year by our global CEO, Jim Farley, that we are doubling our investment in electrification to $22 billion by 2025 alone. So we're very excited. Now, as you probably have heard, globally, we're putting our iconic nameplates, F-150, pickup, Transit, as first line going into electrification.
Well, for ultra-luxury car makers, they're considered somewhat late to the e-car game. However, some of them have already been offering e-cars or at least hybrids. And for Bentley, it is going to be a gradual process to become fully electric.
We will start with the Bentayga hybrid in the back. This year, we come with another second hybrid model of our lineup. By 2023, our entire range will offer a hybrid version. By 2025, we will have the first electric car coming to the Chinese market. By 2026, we will only offer hybrid or electrified versions. And by 2030, we will only offer electrified vehicles.
Some of the emerging Chinese auto brands such as XPeng, NIO, and Li Auto are feeling the pressure from Huawei and Baidu, which are tapping into the smart auto industry as well. And these emerging auto brands' recent share price drops in the US reflected this market concern. So I caught up with XPeng at the Shanghai Auto Show to talk about the heating up competition and how the company coped with the pressure.
I'm very happy with more competition. Today's market size is very small. In many cities, new energy vehicles only account for about 8% of car sales. Of all the cars in China, only less than 2% are electric vehicles. I actually think the market size is growing with more players joining in. I think in the next 5 to 15 years, the global car market will converge and consolidate like mobile phones. That is to say, globally, only 5 to 10 manufacturers will survive and make at least 80% of the cars sold on the market. I feel competition should come sooner for us to think deeper about what we should produce for our future and what the advantages and disadvantages are.
Going forward, challenges remain for the global auto industry. For example, the global shortage of chip supply, but that's going to be a case-by-case matter for different auto brands. Tech-savvy brands will face more headwinds, while luxury brands will be slightly better off. However, the overall 2021 auto sales for China remains very strong among automakers, as China still leads the global economic recovery in the post-pandemic era. Xia Cheng, CGTN, at the Auto China 2021 in Shanghai.
Right then, on to the business of commodities, starting of course with a focus on the things that power the vehicles most of us drive, crude oil. Now, over a 12-month horizon, crude oil and copper have posted some really strong returns, up by 81% on the top end. That's the case of WTI, 77% in the last 12 months for copper. For comparison, platinum prices have only gone up by about 13% over the same period. Coming back to the continent, Nigeria's oil output in the first quarter of the year relatively flat, around 1.4, 1.3 million barrels of crude a day. But that's 10 to 20% lower compared to average output in 2020 and 2019, respectively. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to an Egyptian artist who's making art out of food.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
One last story for you in this shower. This one is from Egypt. Dalia Hosni is a young Egyptian who specializes in food art. When you talk about things like chocolate syrup and macaroni, more often than not, you're thinking about using them in the kitchen, not as ingredients for works of art. But this young Egyptian says he wants to inspire everyone to find their inner artist. Here's Adel Mahrouki with her story.
As a child, Dalia Hosni never listened to her mom when she yelled, "Don't play with your food." She always loved to draw, and over the years, leftovers became her tools to make edible art.
I wanted to change the concept that art is not for everyone. It's only for big shots. It shouldn't be in galleries. Every one of us is special. Everyone is a portrait. I wish to see art in every house. I searched for materials that are available in our everyday life. And for the past 4 years, I have been experimenting with food.
Dalia graduated from business school last year. Throughout her 4 years of study, though, developing art skills were her prime mission.
I draw with all kinds of food. There isn't an item that I can't shape into art, even ice cream. Everything that can be art is handled properly. My favorite is chocolate. It's tasty and lots of people love it. This kind of art is not popular globally. A food artist's main challenge is how to preserve their art so it can be displayed for longer for people to enjoy.
Seeing her passion, her friends encouraged her to post her work online. Her first drawing was a portrait of Liverpool's top football star, the Egyptian Mo Salah. Dalia used spaghetti for his hair. The photo trended in Egypt. The 23-year-old artist instantly knew that she found her goal in life. Online, she inspires tens of thousands of followers, many of whom are interested in drawing with food.
I feel very happy when I post my painting on social media and then people try to replicate my drawings. Some send them to me. No matter how simple the drawing is, I feel proud. And that one person might have loved art because of me. This is my mission after all. Art for all.
The young Egyptian now gets professional requests to do advertisements. But she doesn't want the business side of her artwork to detract from her passion. So from time to time, she comes to inspirational places like here at the Great Pyramids of Giza to connect with her passion and plan her next steps. Adel Mahrouki, CGTN, Cairo.
All right, then let's wrap up with the run through the currencies for you, starting the world of crypto. So Coinbase, as you might recall, did go public last week. Bitcoin, though, has been taking a bit of a beating in the public arena. It's down by at least 10% today, down to under $56,000 as far as Bitcoin is concerned. Despite that, you're still looking at year-to-date gains of closer to 90%. Of the currencies we track on the program, only the Kenyan shilling, the cedi, and the rand have had gains of some sort against American dollars so far this year. Zambia's kwacha is down 5%. The CFA franc has ceded nearly 2% of the dollar. The naira is roughly 3% weaker over the same period. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your time in the last hour. The World Today's up next from Washington, D.C.